So yeah, I'm based in Florida, Tampa,
Mhm.
Florida, born and raised. I know you post about Morocco all the time.
Yes, yes, I'm Moroccan, born and raised too. Well, I have some. I've had some experiences abroad. Like just after I was born, my parents were in France, northern France, in a small city called Nancy, and they were students there. So I spent my 5 first years in France. Um, but this is not the reason why like French is my like mother tongue. I've been in school in French school my whole life. So there's that. And also it's the second language in Morocco. So it's used a lot in like in business circles. The banking system is in French too. And most people around it do speak French. Have you ever been here?
I went once in college.
Mhm.
Ironically, I studied abroad in Spain, and
Oh, okay. No.
on the weekends we would do trips. And ironically, like the first weekend trip we did wasn't in Europe, but it was in Morocco, but very touristy.
Yeah.
Super. It was only a
It
few
depends.
days, and it was.
uh, It
I didn't.
depends where you went. Tangier, I assume.
Tangier is where the hotel was, and then we went to Chefchaouen, the Blue City,
Oh, did you
and
smoke
2
there?
other places around there, but I don't remember
Yeah.
what else. Why are you laughing at Chefchaouen? It was very, well,
That would be
that's like the one that is all over Pinterest and,
Yeah, the Blue
whatever.
City. Well, it's a high place of like culturally in Morocco, like people smoke hash, and Chefchaouen has had like, big names come in to taste the local hash. Like the Sex Pistols were here. David Bowie was here. Bob Marley went to Chefchaouen to taste the local products. Um, and it's quite accepted in Moroccan society. Like it's yeah, there are a lot of smokers around here.
There was like a haggling experience. They encouraged us to
Mhm.
haggle. That was very like, that was fun. I got like a knit coat jacket sort of thing. Some people got blankets with like a spices
Oh,
and whatever. There were bathhouses. That's very normal there too. I wanted to explore one of those, but we didn't have any time. Um,
you know what you know what's interesting is that you'll get different vibes depending on where you go. Like um, the northern parts are nothing like, let's say, Marrakesh or Casablanca or Rabat. There are like very distinct universes. Um, and it's a complete different vibe depending on where you go. So you'll have a very unique experience each time you visit a different place here. So I'm very curious about your story. Who are you? We've been like exchanging and chatting for a long time. I know about your profile. I'm honestly a big fan of what you post. Um, I'm not sure I always do understand your intent, but I guess it's I guess it's a different different frequency.
that's
Um,
super fair, right? And I don't think it's been very intentional. Uh,
so I heard different stories about you. But, Ego told me you were a journalist, and you don't look like a journalist, and you don't, or at least you don't sound like a journalist. So, and then there's all these things I hear about you. I know you're friends with the client accession guys, and so there are so many sides to you that I. Who are you? What's your background?
Grew up in the restaurant business. My mom
Okay.
is a local, one of the original fine dining scene chefs slash restaurateurs in this area. Before Tampa, Tampa's growing now a lot, and now it's kind of on the map, but it wasn't always. So I grew up in that. Worked that my whole life. Was expected to take that business over. Very cliche Asian family. And then even when I wasn't working for her and left that, went in and out of that for years. Worked hospitality, different scenes. And then yeah, through college I did that. After college, I explored the news path because I had a very vague idea that I wanted to. I've always loved writing. Always loved talking to people. Always loved exploring. Uh, and I needed like I was exploring communications and journalism and writing and media as a major, and one of the prerequisites to that degree was some sort of paid internship that was supposed to imply like the job I'd explore. So we had a family friend who's a news anchor. He's like, "Have you ever thought about being on camera and, like, doing storytelling that way?" I was like, not
Hell
really."
yeah.
He's like, "Well, you should."
Oh, okay. Okay. I was expecting a hell yeah instead, but yeah, right? Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were surprised that I wasn't more interested in that too, and I was
Okay.
really it's getting to know yourself in a different way. Like, I was always very comfortable socially, but on the camera was different, especially the way they train you. You know, you're supposed to put together, like, a newsreel of you reporting different stories and exploring different scenes, whether it was a car crash or some local thing happening. Um, wasn't very natural or as in depth as I wanted.
I guess I just got the answer to my next question is was it because it didn't feel authentic? Uh, It wasn't you, everything was scripted, even your behavior in front of the camera had to be a certain way. Is that what annoyed you there?
Yeah, so yeah, it was very scripted. I didn't mind that part initially, right? Like, you would whether you were doing it at the news anchor desk or out in the field, there was a script. There was a certain way you were expected to deliver that.
Mhm,
I got a lot of helpful critique in terms of delivery that I haven't practiced enough since. But
mhm.
yeah, it didn't feel very authentic. The least authentic part of it, though, wasn't that. It was the way they chose the stories and kind of what they were
Oh,
curious in. Kind of the pieces that they were curious about gathering to put together the stories didn't feel as authentic. I think you assume in your earliest perceptions of what the news is
yeah,
that their main driver is these are the stories that people need to know. These are the most relevant, honest stories about what's going on. This is going to form like a comprehensive view of like what's going on in the world, what's going on in the city, of culture. Um, and that's wasn't the
narratives,
decision making criteria.
yeah, yeah, narrative
Very
narratives.
attention driven, very clicky, very, um, and very trickle down from other sources. Like, the local station didn't make as many choices about what was interesting to them as I thought they would. So I would sit in the morning meetings where they're picking the news stories and they're like, "Oh, let's throw this up there. We need to do this. Everybody's covering this. Oh, it's been a little negative for too long. Let's throw a cat being saved from a tree so we don't lose the audience's attention." And that was the sort of decision making. So I was just like, something didn't sit right with me at the time. And this is way before I, had any other conclusions about the media.
Okay. Who gets to choose? What I'm trying to understand here is that I've been working with journalists for a long time, and
Okay. It's
I
probably much
guess
different.
yes, well, quite different, but like the environment here is pretty. It's different because like political journalism here is not based on debate as much as it's based on news. Well, again, like it's different political systems and different ways to actually work, and it's a lot. Um, I don't want to say copied, but it's heavily inspired by like French journalism, and it's French journalism is very different from what I can see and and conclude. It's very different from American journalism, where like the information is more important than the attention. And I guess it changes. It's changing there too, and it's changing here too because, like competition from social media, competition from um, small creators or independent journalists. It completely shuffled the cards. So what I have a hard time understanding is that the local level, who gets to choose like the stories, who gets to choose this is the angle we're gonna go with, or are we? Is it like politically uh, biased? Is it like a political bias, or is it like financial interests from I don't know lobbies, etc., or is just like the cheap rules and that's it?
A huge part of that was pulling from these big databases that all the news sources pull from.
Okay, okay,
So
like
a really big part of deciding what stories we were going to talk about was pulling from this library. I don't remember what the time. There was a couple. I don't remember what the names of them were.
like
But all
aggregators, like writers and things like that.
yeah, yeah, other
Okay,
journalists.
okay,
Um, and seeing what those headlines were and what was the most relevant stories from that. And then from there, the decision making was just very attention, right? So I'm sure there's an influence of there's a director and the way the station wants to be represented. Um, but I don't think that necessarily the intentions were political. I guess that's an influence in their decision making, but it wasn't like a headline story was chosen because, oh, this resonates with me more or this doesn't resonate with me more. Like, what does our audience want? What are people talking about? What's going to get their attention? And from that, I think people form a more political stance.
It's bias at the source. You
Yeah.
wanted to, if you wanted to find like the political bias, it would be higher up in the chain of information.
Right, and there's not really much questioning surrounding that, right? It's just kind of
Oh, it's
like,
the
adopting
truth.
without
That's
question.
yeah, yeah. That's the truth, and that's information, and deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it just
Okay.
wasn't interesting to me.
So then you shifted.
Then I shifted, so that summer I was working in Orlando and also in Tampa. So it's very work heavy summer. I was a huge workaholic at the time. So I was working at least 40 hours a week here, managing my mom's restaurant on the road to potentially taking over the restaurant business, and working at least 20 hours a week in Orlando, potentially taking the news anchor path. And also watching my brother. My family was abroad in Europe on their vacation. They go every summer during the hottest time of year here in Florida. It's a nice time to travel. And at the end of that, I was just burnt out and wasn't really vibing with the news thing. Wasn't really vibing with taking over my mom's business, which I think I already knew, but I just was trying to not because you're finishing college and you're like, what am I gonna do with my life? I have no whatever. So I was at that fork of the road and I was at the end of the summer and I was like, I'm miserable and neither of these is calling me. So I think I kind of want to just regress a little bit, to be honest. And that's when I said no. I looked very crazy at the news opportunity too, because I was the only intern who didn't have broadcast journalism experience in college. Typically, you apply to the internship with some sort of newsreel you formed in college, with that being your degree. That wasn't my case. I had, a family friend and an interview. Those are the two decision-making criteria for accepting me. And at the end of it, you're allowed one shot at the anchor desk. And in the history of the news station, nobody had ever been given a second shot at the anchor desk, but I was, and also opportunities. So I was like, no, and I couldn't articulate why, right? I was like, oh, I just don't vibe with this. Like, who takes that seriously? And I also left my mom's business. So I went back down into serving and bartending, in favor of having the spare time in that role to, I was like, I want to continue writing. I met a couple ad guys who worked there that really, they were my favorite people in the whole station. It was, which was confusing to people because I should have been leveraging all the spare time I had to get out in the field with reporters. But I just loved them. Like they were so cool. We would go to lunch and just talk about life and talk about real stories and talk about their decision making behind advertising. And I had taken one advertising class in college that I was also surprised to adore because it wasn't just, the cliche perception of advertising where it's like, oh, we didn't want to blah, blah, blah. Like felt a lot more authentic than the stories, which was so weird, but I just knew what I liked. And they were like, don't stop writing. Like they picked up on, I remember in hindsight,
And then
them
right.
kind of zooming in on the fact that I wasn't there to be on camera and I really liked stories and I really liked writing. So they were just like, don't stop writing. Um, so after that, I was like, okay, I want to write and I want to work freelance. Like I just had this idealistic idea of writing freelance and working freelance somehow, traveling, being able to work anywhere I had Wi-Fi. And
What was
fast
that?
what was what?
Like this period was around which time?
Uh so I graduated college in 2017.
Okay.
And then that was like the following couple of years.
Okay.
And
So
but I got sucked in a hospitality life. Like you work, I would pick up any shift I could. So I was working every night, every weekend. If I wasn't working a shift, I was, grabbing drinks after work with my team, hungover during the day, then going for my dinner shift, and the daytime was supposed to be the time I was being productive. So I didn't honestly get serious about it. I tried a few things online here and there. On in the Twitter, started getting a little bit more vocal in the Twitter space. Not really. Like I'd been on Twitter forever. Um,
oh,
and the yeah.
you're pretty well known on Twitter. Like I don't, like most people I know they do know you. I know you're Like your account is nowhere where you want it to be, but like you have a good reputation around. People know you.
People show up there to make a name for themselves and make money, which is great, and it's a really important part of the platform that I need to take more seriously and that I've been trying to begin doing, but it wasn't why I got there, right? I just got there because in high school, I loved tweeting, I loved reading tweets, I would just write
It's
about
fun.
my thoughts. It was like a public journal, and then got into the money Twitter funnel.
I like that idea of my public journal, and this is how it started too for me. So I feel you. I know what
How did you get into the money Twitter space yourself? Were you, was that your incentive?
I've never I've never considered myself like part of money Twitter. I found myself in it by pretty much by accident. So my background is that I graduated in marketing and political science around 2015. And I grew up in a family that is very politically active here in Morocco. So my first job was advisor to the Minister of Industry here in Morocco. A minister here is the equivalent of Secretary of State. So I was in charge of PR. And back then I was part of a team where most of my colleagues were in their 40s, like late 40s, early 50s, and they were at the peak of their career. Like they were all public servants, and they were at the peak of their career, and I was 24. Um, and the political arena, pretty much everywhere, I guess, is cutthroat, and you need to impose yourself, or otherwise you're just gonna lose your job and be considered as incompetent. And if it happens to you, at least here in Morocco, if it happens to you like too soon in your career, you just burn. Nobody's going to recruit you. It's a very, like, compared to the USA, it's a very small country. And in each industry, like the big players of each industry, they all know each other. And if you're not good on your first job, you're done. So I needed to have an edge. And my edge was that being the youngest, I was the most exposed to social media. Um, so I created the first political account for like someone who is in office in Morocco. I guess I was the first in the whole continent, but I don't want to be that pretentious. Um, and my strategy was to combine like PR, like relations with journalists, etc. I was writing the minister's speeches, and I was the one communicating with the journalists. But what I added is like live communication. It existed like in Europe and the West and pretty much everywhere in the world except here. Um, so I started like this direct communication through Twitter, but I didn't understand anything about the platform, so I created this account of mine. Well, this is the reason why I was anonymous to begin with. And my goal was to understand how to grow influence online and how to be able to recreate. So I use techniques that you use for speeches, that you use for like com- traditional communication, and I applied that political strategies to Twitter. And I used whatever levers of influence on the social media to the political speech in Morocco. And this created some sort of a positive feedback loop between both. Like it spired it up. Um, and I was very surprised as someone from Morocco to be able to grow my account to the heights that I'm more surprised than anyone else. Yes, it was a conscious work. I drafted the narrative. I worked on the branding. I worked on the associations. And we'll talk about this later if you want. Um, but I didn't think that experiment would have that much success. And when I say success, it's that at some point the account outgrew me because people were asking me to produce something for them to buy, and at no point in my initial thinking was I thinking, well, I'm going to use that to make money. For me, I was still like I was a public servant, and for me, internet money doesn't exist. And I'm talking about 2016, 2017. Um, so people started asking me to write a book. I didn't have time to write a book, but then COVID hit, and I had plenty of time. So this is how I started writing Vizier. And Vizier changed a lot in the way I see the internet and people on the internet, because I went from this idea that money doesn't exist on there's no way people make money on the internet to, well, most money should be made on the internet. And this is like it broke a mental barrier that I had in my mind. So this is basically the background and how I first started this account.
It was almost like rep that representation was your first language, so obviously you were gonna use that to be on Twitter, but because that was so effective, you got that feedback, right? Um,
Oh, I'm still quite confused about it, and I'm gonna tell you why. Uh, I've never wanted to be I've never wanted to be public, because I've been around like I've been around famous people, like locally famous people. I know how dangerous it could be, and I've been like an advocate of, guys, you don't want to be famous. You want money, you want power, but you don't want fame, and it's actually fake status. And my internet experience so far proved that was wrong. There are different levels of fame, and there is a balance to strike, and that balance to strike is to have actually, and it is crazy that it's something that is being told a lot these days now that the algo change on X. I'll keep calling it Twitter anyway. The algo change on Twitter, it made people remember that what's important if you want to have influence, even if you want to make money online, is not to have like the biggest audience as you can. Like that's not what you want. What you want is to have some sort of a private community. It doesn't matter its size. You want to have a private community of people who vibe with what you say, and this is more interesting because when we talk about social media, everyone is overthinking the media and underthinking the social part, which is in my opinion, it's the most important one. Like the relationships you build, the network you gain, the opportunities that open up to you, it's just insane. Like uh, I think we're not aware enough of how revolutionary this is. Like I've been I've been around before the internet, and like the scale of what we can do right now, it's just crazy.
that's probably what, stood out to me. One of the things that stood out to me most about your account because, like, the influence and how you're representing yourself and whatever, I think is an effect and uh, like a byproduct of
Hmm.
these strategies that you were using.
Hmm.
But I didn't have sharp discernment on that, right? Because even if I was whether I was effective or I was ineffective, it wasn't necessarily intentional, right? Uh,
That's the thing. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
that's the thing. What was your goal with what was your goal with Twitter when you first started out?
originally, no goal. I was just on there since before I got up high school. Notable about like Miss Twitter. I just loved like the writing medium.
Hmm.
I knew that I always, since I was a kid, wanted a blog of some sort. Like I wanted to just talk to people, share my story, talk to other people, share their story. I've been journaling since I was a kid, would write about people I met. I would always mingle around the restaurant. I introduce myself to everybody at that news station. It's just always a social butterfly. I did that on Twitter, so I made all these friends. And then, so I'm moving backwards. as you can see. Like, I think people start on the other end of it and have to work towards the remember, like, that the human element is important, and remember, like, take responsibility for influence and blah, 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 and mine was, like, very social interested, um, thing going around. So now I'm, just trying to be more intentional with the, influence and how I represent myself and what I can do with it.
I think you, at the end of the day, you attract to, and this is something that I say a lot. You attract people who are similar to you. Um, what you broadcast is what you get. And I get most of people, and I bet you have like very wild stories. I've had female clients that I advised on their communication strategy on Twitter, telling me that the experience as a woman on Twitter is something that is very different from what we dudes like what we dudes see in the and she told me some great wild stories. And I guess you have some of those too.
Yeah. Yes. It's Yeah, being a woman on the internet is funny, right?
Is it? Yeah, I guess so. Oh, well, I guess so. I can't know for a fact, but I guess it is. So I wonder how that makes the experience different. I wouldn't want to be. I guess this is a Western audience. I have to be very picky about my words and my sentences. Um, I wouldn't want to have so much attention from strangers. If I was a woman, I would be way more vigilant about my different interactions, my DMs, my maybe people who I interact with, because at the end of the day, these are people that I don't know and I don't know their intentions. I would feel like a duck in the hunting season during the hunting season. Like
I've
everyone's
struggled with
target.
that. I've struggled with that. I think it's fair to assume that you this is gonna be redundant, but, like, it's you look at a woman on the internet and you look at a man on the internet, and there's different assumptions, right? Like, um, and I didn't like the incentives that you can first assume for a woman who wants some sort of presence or attention on the internet. And
That's
I
not the
have always
yeah.
honestly, historically avoided those. Or like and like any attention I sought or like posting pictures or whatever was genuinely me just creating. And like there's a local community here that I've shot with plenty of photographers. So like that's been repurposed for content. Obviously, social butterflying around Twitter has been repurposed for this network. And even the word leaves a funny taste in my mouth. And I had the similar thing to you where it's like I didn't want that version of it, you know?
Mm,
Um,
yeah,
because it comes with a lot that you have to deal with. Uh, yeah.
I guess so.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you said you weren't interested in keep growing your online influence. Is that like what we mentioned could be the reason for that, or do you have like other reasons?
I think the first phase of that reasoning was assigning that meaning to it. The first meaning where it's like you kind of pointed in the direction of it when you were saying how why you were anonymous at first. That's really not what you wanted to use it for.
Mhm.
That was it, right? Like I rejected that identity, like just wanting to get online and like I want attention. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Uh, I grew up also around a lot of notable people. It was very normalized to me. Uh, and in that scene are people who want that for reasons that didn't resonate. So I couldn't separate those for a long time. Very like, you know, if you think of like the cliche artist or the cliche starving artist, right? It's you don't have an understanding of attention and influence in business. You just want to like express yourself and create and do things. And that's where I came from, to be honest. Like
And you,
any
yeah,
attention that I gained on the way there was kind of a happy accident, which it feels so arrogant to talk about sometimes because that's what people want.
well, it makes sense. It makes sense. Well, but still, you need to deal with that as an artist. You need to deal
Mhm.
with those business aspects, like you need to deal with fame, and I guess most people who get famous by accident, they're not prepared for that. They're not prepared for that, and especially if you don't have any exposure to what it entails and what like fame. It looks very attractive, and people want to be famous, but they don't know what the consequences of that could be. Um, I'm talking about physical security. I'm talking about your family. I'm talking about your friends. Like I've seen some horrible things around. Um,
Do you
but
feel
it
like
still
that
need.
lack of understanding where how, like, you're positioning and representing yourself with that fame, it creates a lot of liabilities when you don't really know what the effects of those are, right?
Well, to be completely fair, fame is something that you could leverage in order to create something that is good for you and for people around you. But it needs to be, like you said, it needs to be intentional. You need to know what you're doing with it, and you need to be aware. You need to be aware of what could happen. Um, it's it's a form of power. It's a form of power in the sense that it's a tool that could do a lot of good to you, and it's a tool that could hurt you too. It's like fire. Um, well, I get the impression that in this day and age, like that your online status back in the days, status was based, and I'm talking about this dichotomy between like online and in real life. Like in order for you to be famous online, you needed to have achieved something in real life. You needed to have this high status in real life that you could then transfer to the online world. Now, if you don't have that status online, like status online gives you IRL status. That's an influence. That's the guy that people become famous online first and foremost, and then they get known IRL. And it became how to say that? It became a condition for business success. Whether you're doing B2B, whether you're an artist, whether you're in politics, whether you're um in business like industry or B2B, B2C, all everyone needs to have some sort of exposure, and everybody's fighting for else's attention, and it created it created some very weird new kind of humans. Um, and I was talking to a friend earlier, and we were discussing this very subject, and he said, "Have you seen? Do you remember the Island Boys? And have you seen what they have become?" And I knew about that. Like I knew about that phase. Their I don't know how they got famous in the first place, to be honest. But still, they tasted like the attention and the money that comes with that attention, and then they lost it all because there were no real talent there, and they became famous for the wrong reasons, like eccentric hair, and like people were making fun of them. It's not a recognition of talent. But then when they tasted that what they call success, because in their mind that's what success looks like. They try to gain back that attention by any mean. And I've seen like he showed me a video s- incestuous shit. Like it was disgusting. And
I haven't seen that.
but I understood the intention there. Like people get hooked to that attention. Like dopamine is a hell of a drug, and if you're not intentional about what you're doing, if you don't have a plan, you're gonna you're gonna become um, an employee of social platforms, and this is what I see with like the new model of ad driven you on Twitter. Like you're basically becoming an employee of X. If they're and they're not paying that much, to be honest. Like you have a few people who gain like 80% of the ad revs, and the rest are just fighting for scrubs. Um, Either you do that, or if you do have an actual service, an actual thing that you need to communicate about in that specific thing. People like to say niche or niche, depending on where you're from. Um, it's totally legitimate because you have a plan. You know what to control, and people get to extremes sometimes. Like privacy is still important. People don't need to know about your ins and outs. People don't need to see. It's like the people who share pictures of their kids. If you knew how many crazy pedophiles are out there, you wouldn't be doing that. You don't want to do that. So
I think
part
you
of
just hit on something really important, and the word it's that we're not living in this same world in terms of how you can earn attention and, like, this attention economy we're living in, you used to have to sophisticate through certain levels in life and business to earn that, to earn the attention, like, that was the prerequisite, and now it's flipped, right? Like, you can get the attention and the status online. If you don't get it, you'll get beat out by all the competition who is leveraging it as a tool, but with that also comes people who can start on that end of it, get the attention, and haven't gone through the sophistication and the real barriers to entry there used to be of status and value. Like, you can show up to, a $1 million venue, whatever, really expensive, nice place, whatever, afford it, be known, but not have any concept of, social, real life social stuff, taste, and the sophisticated awareness of things. Like that's no longer a prerequisite.
Yeah, what have you done? What have you done to like gain us attention? Like, and people resort to very weird behaviors, that just to gain attention for attention. And I blame that. I blame that business model. I'll be I'll be labeled as a hater, but I don't think I don't think distributing ad revenue to creators, and I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that, is a good thing. I think it turns people into what they don't want to be. Um, People humiliate. They go to extremes in order to gain attention, and that's their accomplishment. We I don't want to be that, like, mm, the lecturer who says this is right and this is wrong. My that's not
No,
my
I
goal.
think you have instincts about what that path looks like, right? If you are even further financially incentivized to gain attention in that way, and you have any sort of lack, right? Like you need the validation, you need the money, you or you're escaping something else, and you try to get those needs met through this route. It doesn't lead you down a good, healthy path
Absolutely,
mentally,
absolutely.
which goes obviously into physically and existentially and everything. So I don't think that it's unfair to say that.
You will have a miserable life. Okay, if you're pursuing the wrong things, you will pay the price one way or another. Like, just take time as a parameter of what's valuable in life. And do you want your life to be resumed as this guy was a clown on the internet and people, i- whatever money you have made out of it? Like, I think about, like, Logan Paul. That's a tragedy. Like, having your life. I don't judge people. I don't judge people. They get with whoever they want, and they marry whoever they want, and I don't get to have an opinion on that, but I get to have an opinion on he allowed the whole world to have an opinion on his personal life. This is the tragic part. To have people have an opinion on your life, on your private life. And this is a deal that you make. You wanted
Right.
to be famous. You wanted to be famous, and you did everything you could to become famous. And you succeeded in that. But there is a price to pay. Like, the attention and the money that you had for having basically no talent. Like, humanity isn't better because you're around. Um you will have to pay it somehow. And this is how you pay it. Like, you get into a clash, and that was like that. fight was supposed to it was supposed to be a money grab. Like people are going to pay to watch it, and so we're gonna hype up the fight. We're gonna we're gonna do it like in the UFC, like the Conor McGregor stuff, shit talking, and whatever can brings it can bring attention. We're gonna do it, but then at some point, not sure you'll like it.
Do you agree that kind of underpinning that is people kind of compartmentalize and tunnel vision on the online reality and the real life reality? And so they make certain decisions to further the online reality. And then, when they land themselves in trouble, like the Logan Paul situation, it's not like you can just sign off, right? Like it affects your real life. You walk around, now you are known for this attention and the way you earned it online. And now people are looking at you and you have the attention and you're living your life. They're not separate.
There's no going back, and there's no going back. You'd better be know like this is an advice for normal people like us. If you want to make money online, it's true, it's legitimate, it works. If you actually bring in something, if you solve a problem for someone, like, and you don't need many followers to make a living on the internet. You don't need to have millions of followers to get rich of the internet. This is what's interesting about the whole thing. You need to be public to a certain extent. You want to be known for your competence mainly, and that's basically it. You don't need a billion followers. You need a good product and a good marketing strategy, and that's basically it. And you could be happy with that.
I think some people find themselves in that position, right? Like you get so much quantity with the followers. And sometimes that's great, or I think it's great often. But I think what you're pointing to is also that maybe in just fixating on the numbers and the analytics of the attention and the notoriety you're getting online and the followers, you didn't really pay enough attention to the qualitative part of it and what kind of followers you had and what kind of feedback you get because of this aggregate
Yeah,
type you've attracted, right? Um, so
it's interesting. It's interesting that you're mentioning that. Um,
what do you think?
I think we tend to reduce like complex things into something we can comprehend. And metrics like the following count, it helps us like indicate this is good, this is less good. Um, and there is that whole it works at actually what's interesting, and the real reason why people are looking to increase their follower count is not necessarily for reach. It's not necessarily to have like access to, it's not even attention. I believe it's a metric for social status. Like a high following count works like an exotic car in a street. It works pretty much the same. People they don't interact with you the same way. And I've had an account at 0, and I've had an account at 10K followers, and I've had an account at 100K followers, and I guess it gets more true as that account grows. People start treating you like they're offering that kind of deference or respect that you don't necessarily deserve. I don't, there's a halo effect. It's like the la blouse blanche. It's like that thing that wears that the doctors wear. I have it in French, but
Scrubs?
not gloves, like the la blouse. Do you say blouse?
Like the white doctor's coat?
Yes, the doctor's coat. How do you call that?
I don't know if we have a word for it. I was
Okay.
guessing scrubs, like when you have like matching set of
It it works like that. Like if you wear like it's a sign of authority, and it
like a
creates that
status.
halo. It's about status, and for me, it's 100% about status. For those who are more pragmatic, they see it as how much reach do I have? But then if you're really pragmatic about it, it doesn't mean anything because even if you had a million followers, you're not talking to a million people each time you produce a piece of content. So, so I tend to think that it would be better for our mental health and for business too, to instead of trying to grow infinitely that follower count just to gain money from Twitter or gain money from YouTube. You don't want money from advertisers. If there is like one thing you don't want, because it's not your money, even if it's a lot. It's not your money because you pay it not only with your work, but you pay it also with your opinion, and you start paying. If I do this that way, I'm not going to please the advertisers. So the advertisers become your boss, basically,
Right.
and you're not that
Right.
free. You're not really free. Like if you see, I've seen many people. Like YouTube is the the more developed version of that model. So you see some creators started like very small with a small community around them, and they would be very free saying whatever cuss word they want, and it could be like part of their whole branding. But as their account grows, there are some topics they suddenly cannot talk about. There are certain opinions they suddenly cannot voice. They have to format their messaging in a certain way, and that makes them just not free. Is that money worth it? I'm not sure. Whereas you could have a very small community of people who are engaged with you, people who are interested in what you actually have to say. And if you're familiar with like the theory of the thousand fans, it's completely true. If you get like 1,000 people around you that support your work, and you actually provide something of value to those thousand people, depending on how well you manage the business side of it, you can be good. That's enough.
Yeah. I I agree with you on the whole ad revenue thing, even more so with the point you just made, because I got into Twitter because I loved that we would just make friends based on our ideas.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
when you point to the fact that once you go down that path, it puts a cap on what thoughts you can share, and the way you think kind of gets it's like it encourages self censorship, which sucks because not only like does that put a cap on your development as start to think bigger and bigger and make your way through controversial like knots you just have to untangle on the journey of growing and making it through life and earning different things. Like if that's interfered with, it inherently stunts your mental development, and it
Yeah.
also makes um like it just muddies the feedback, right? Like I
Yeah.
used to, oh, I like the way you think. Like I like these ideas that you produce. Um but if you're giving a bunch of people positive validation for oh
You
like just
get it.
lame.
No, you get it. No, you get it.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. You get it. Like that. Those. It drives me nuts. Like it drives me crazy. Those. You see those posts. Like they're clearly made. Like they're engagement based. Like it's a question, and it's an empty question. There's no value to that shit. And I
No.
know it's gonna get. And I know it's gonna get reached because there are more morons than there are intelligent people. So we can no more say on X, go to someone and say, hey, I like your ideas. It used to be a market of ideas. That's what Twitter was. That's what made Twitter interesting. Is that we could yell at each other, we could insult each other, and we could fall in love with someone else's ideas. That's the beauty of it. That was the beauty of it. Now you cannot even be negative. You cannot have a negative interaction, or else you get deboosted. You cannot have a well formulated thought because it doesn't match the format that the algo wants to push. So what
It
does
almost
the
limits critical thinking, right? Because
yes,
it creates all
yes,
these trigger points. So now
yeah,
if you disagree, it is inherently like
violent,
uh
You're
Yes.
violent.
Nobody can really have that, uh, separation and overlap of ideas that we can address, right? I can't show you a different place and perspective without it being whatever, and it doesn't serve you walk down that new path
No.
because you're getting validated for the opposite all the time in every way from all directions. And it's just, oh, critical discussion is just, I just watch it like going down and down, even by really brilliant people that I love the way they think, but it's like they are walking down that path. And I'm like, oh, but I love your thoughts when you just have to go through having to produce them and ask yourself questions and, oh, yeah.
It's sad. It's sad because even those who actually are able to produce like well formulated, articulated thoughts, those people that you used to admire for their thinking, now they're being punished for that. And so they don't have any reach when they do that. So they have to resort to shitty tactics um, that makes like giveaways. The fuck was that? Like, what, what is about giveaways when where are the ideas? Where are the people I was disagreeing with? Where are they? I want them. I want my like intellectual enemies. I want them. I want to talk
Yeah.
to them. I want them to yell at me. I want them to disagree with me. I want those trolls. Where are those trolls? I only get bots. And those bots are talking about some DeFi shit that I don't understand. And I
Oh,
keep
they're everywhere.
Wow, and I keep blocking those accounts and they keep popping up back like hydras and it's a never ending hell.
If they
But
take on blocking, I'm quitting Twitter.
it just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. Like hopefully this is why I'll stay on Twitter and this is why I no more want to be anon because I actually like the people I talk to. So I've been thinking a lot about like my Twitter presence. And this is my conclusion. There are still people like you that I talk to, people who actually genuinely interact with what I post, and people with whom I generally reply to their tweets, not because I want some algo boost, but because I find their ideas interesting, and I have them on notifications. And this is a real human connection. This is not decided by the algorithm. This is like these are people that I actually care about. I like my followers, and I don't think that I have followers. I believe that I have friends. So my point is, I'd rather have this community, like talking to you, talking to people like you that I appreciate on this platform, and just keep posting. I believe it's going to self correct at some point, but that's not my main concern. Like I don't necessarily want my account to grow more than it is. And any
I think that's a great intention, right? Because you also have it's bigger than you. If you want this to still exist and live and have oxygen, this way of being in the attention idea economy, then it people like you need to be in it, right?
yeah,
So that's exciting.
it's very time taxing too. You need to have some times on your hand to be doing that or doing that like full time, which is not something that I would like to do. But I'm still on my phone anyway, and I still love to talk to people, and that's what I do. That's why I'm on the internet. Um, and I consider that I am past that period where I needed to protect my face or protect my identity because I don't have that duty of I don't know if it's I'm not sure that's the right word, but there is that expression in French that says like devoir de réserve, and devoir de réserve is basically if you hold a position in the government, anything that you say is de facto public communication.
Mm.
And if you say something that is not controlled or your personal opinions, it's like the position of the government. So I needed to respect that. I'm not I'm not in office anymore. I speak for my name and I speak for myself, and I'm ready to like to take responsibility for what I say. So
I love that.
and I'm also at a different stage of my life. When I started, I wasn't I wasn't married. I was alone, and I was just doing my work and experimenting things on the internet. Now, I'm a father. I'm the head of a family. I'm a business person. I have competences that I know some people need. Like I can help people with what I know, and there is no reason for me to sabotage my credibility by keeping that association. Because when we started out with the add-on accounts, whether it is me or ego, um, there weren't so many accounts like ours, and I got the feeling that the whole space got an influx of accounts that I don't want to be associated with, like some vague copies of what we do, and they became like in number way more prevalent than we are. Um, so I need that dissociation. I am everything I say I am. Um I'm not LARPing. I'm not lying about my credentials. I'm not, and I need this. I need this to be known. I'm not a masculinity account, for fuck's sake. I'm not a I'm not a masculinity account. I don't adhere to. I'm not a red pill account. I'm not a self improvement account. I'm just me, guys. And it started like that. Um, so people have this those mental images that they've developed about, like, these are associations. Um, for example, I get two kinds of feedbacks. Like the first one is what I was just describing, and the second one is people thinking, like, people have this mental image of me as someone who is a boomer, basically. Like people think I'm way older than what I am, really. And I got that feedback a lot from people who came in here to Morocco to directly meet me, and they were all, "Bro, you're so young. What did you think? I am some 70 years old. I need people to, and but this is my account, and these are my ideas, and this is what I share, and I need to move on. Like I need my account to accompany my personal growth.
I want
And
to
this is
ask
me. Sure.
I want to ask you what you think about your intentions with this like new, because you're I feel like you're entering a new phase with your personal
Yes.
brand, obviously. But I think what the other perception of you comes from is similar to something I've experienced where, like, people need to put labels on things. Earlier you were talking about how we tried to make sense of things. And the boomer label has also been used for ideas that resonate with me. And I think that ties into what we just talked about, which is, the boomer generation had to go through these prerequisites of earning status and value in the world and attention, right? So because that kind of thinking is also something you carry out, it's like, oh, boomer thinking, right? Whereas if you think of Zoomer, like the attention economy and the culture that they bring forward, it's not that. So people are very generational with it.
Well, it's I think there is a different, like there's a difference. Like where I'm from is way different. Like even the generations are quite different from the rest of the world.
Okay.
I believe like each country, not country, but like region has its own like division of generations. Let's say that we didn't have like boomers and then zoomers. If I were to just choose which generation I belong to based on where when I was born, I'm basically a millennial.
Me
And
too.
I was born in when I was very young, there was no internet around. So I knew the world before the internet, and I grew up with the development of the internet. So I was around before YouTube became what it is right now. So I witnessed with my own eyes like the development of those social platforms. I wasn't born with them, and like I can only imagine what like my son who was born with AI will how he will understand the world through the lenses of AI being something that is so available. So there are like values that we carry, that boomer values, basically what you described, like boomer values. And I think we need that kind of discourse on the internet from people who knew what life was before the internet. So I think it's a very positive message for people. It brings in some balance to just for some people who never been there to understand that there was life before the internet and there were a different set of values that you could still carry on today.
And it
And
kind
I
of
think
holds a mirror up to how they're thinking, right?
Mhm.
Because you can be so born into that culture, and especially with AI, I feel like it's just gonna accelerate it.
Oh,
Because it can just reproduce, right? Like, it's just gonna respawn more and more of the thinking and ideas that but whether you call it boomer thinking or whatever it is, like,
mhm.
the the root of it were grounded in the real world. Whereas, like, now
Yeah.
it's the roots, it's sprouted, the dirt was the web, like, the things on the internet. I wanna go back to what you were saying with your, this new era you're entering. Like, have you changed your mind about any secondary things in terms of, like, what you wanna bring and show? Because obviously you've displayed, like, uh, your fluency in relating to the public and, like, strategy and, like, and I've run into a lot of lessons that I could use more clarity on in terms of, like, you have associations and you have your own voice.
Mhm.
I posted on Twitter one day, I was like, "What does it mean when people have in their bio, 'Views are my own'?" Like, I think people thought I was being obtuse. I wasn't. I genuinely was like, "What does that mean, views are my own?" Because to me, that's implied, right? If I associate with someone and I say something, I'm not implying that they and I think the same as I do or they have the same opinion as I do. And I take that for granted because at in PR, you do have to mind how you represent things. And I do, like, if I've ever mentioned or had to have a conversation, whether it's in business or in my personal life, and I know that can imply things about somebody's stance, where it's ally or somebody I've worked with. I ask, like, my friends can attest to this. Like, I'm like, how would you like to be represented on this? Right? Like, I don't want to misrep, but that's even more tricky now. And I think, mm, yeah. So what do you think about that for yourself? Like, do you want to show anything new? Is there anything you haven't been, like, presenting that
Doing
you
so
want to
far,
do?
definitely. I want it to be more structured, honestly. The voice is going to stay the same because it's my own voice, and I always had the same. You'll notice that I'm way more comfortable with writing. I'm more comfortable with text than I am with like the speaking level. And that's because I don't speak English that much, but I do read a lot of English and I do write in English a lot. And I think as a personal development phase, I need to talk more. I need to speak a lot more in English than what I am doing today. So there is that first incentive for me to go public, and I need to own my image. Like from a strategic point of view, I do need to own my image in order for me to own my positions and own my public opinions. Um, the second level is that in terms of content, that is it going to change? The answer is yes and no. Yes, it's going to change in format. So I don't think I know. I'll be doing more. I'll be doing more videos. I'll be doing more videos, and I'll be doing more audios. Um, and I will definitely keep the actual content because this is what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about human nature, and this passion has guided everything I do since I can remember. Um, so even when I talk about PR, where I talk about online influence, where I talk about branding, or I talk about propaganda, it's always centered around, or even when I do social skills with ego, it's always the point of the starting point is always human nature. So I'm still having that central interest in human nature and how apply human nature to different connections and different platforms and different ways of communicating. Um, so you won't. So for people who think they're going to lose Atlas or Atlas's voice, the answer is no. You you're going to get more of that. Does this answers your question?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
Atlas expanded and then not the same Atlas, different level,
Absolutely.
more. Yeah.
It's not the golden lion on a black background, but
Are you gonna
it's a
change
box.
that? We love that. We love that emblem.
Maybe I'll put it as a banner, but there will be like the bold guy with glasses. Probably.
Cool.
Probably. Yeah.
Um, yeah. It's
It
so
it
interesting, right? Because there's so many levels to that. Like, when you're consciously doing these things, there's all the subconscious implications, and sometimes it's tricky for me to discern.
But there's a level of risk. The level of risk here, I have you I didn't tell you about like the Harry Potter theory that I have. Okay. Um it's based on what you described, like the associations. When I was young, around 10 years old, um J.K. Rowling, she wrote that first Harry Potter book. Um, and my dad offered me the book, and it was like one of the most interesting things I got to read. And I fell in love with the story. Um, so I read the first one, then I read the second tome, then I read the third tome. And when I read the tome, um, the movie came out, like the Harry Potter movie came out, and I was a big fan of Harry Potter. I went to the cinema and I watched the movie, and I've never read another book called Harry Potter ever again. And the reason for that was that I had a mental image of how each character sounded like. I had a mental image of how like the school, Hogwarts, how it looked like. I had a mental image of each of the professors were looking like, etc. And then those all those images they were forced into me,
Mhm,
and I it broke something, like it broke the magic that I had reading those books. So the mental image that people have about a specific brand, when you break it, I'm very aware that people are going to be disappointed that I'm not exactly who they imagined me to be. But this is if you want the authentic me, the real me, the one who produced those ideas you liked. This is the real image. And I'm ready to take that risk. Um because I thought a lot about that, and I believe it's it's more honest on my end to do it rather than keep something just to entertain that nostalgia of that those associations that people can have about that.
that's so interesting, I've never heard that. Did you come up with that?
Come up with
The
what?
Harry Potter, what is it?
No,
The
no,
Harry Potter
no.
what?
It's my story. Yeah, it's my
Okay, okay.
story with Harry
Well, I mean,
Potter. Yeah,
'cause you point to something that it always exists, which is your idea of something and the reality of it, right?
yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily the same thing for you where it's like, I think we can all relate to if we read or if we read stories
Mhm.
as a kid and saw the movie come out, like, there is usually most of the time a
Always.
disappointment. Like, it's
Yeah.
just the real thing is not as great as the idea of it was. It can happen with people, like I don't know about you, but I've met people online and then met them in person and, like, the reality of it wasn't as cool. But then I also have experiences like this conversation where, like,
Yes.
you see more and it's not like it's almost like the movie for you was it it capped it off, but
Mhm.
you can
Oh, you can have
also
it. Yeah, yeah. You can have it the
discover
other way.
reality, it,
Yeah.
like, opens up this world even further, and it's an expansion, and it's like, "Oh, nice, like, this aligns with it and the core things that I enjoyed it for, respected it for, and there's more." So
It happened to me with when Dylan Madden came here to Morocco. Like I had a very friendly I had very friendly conversations with him, but and I invited him to come here to see me. And when I discovered like the real person behind the account, obviously he's not anonymous. He has his face out there, and he's been talking front of the camera a lot, etc. But like meeting Dylan in person, I
But
liked him. I liked him even more because he is not only at the level that he portrays, but he is someone who is even he's even better in reality. And Dylan is Dylan is a great inspiration for a lot of people because that's a genuine guy who's killing it, and he deserves a lot of respect. So
I really like his
based on
stuff.
that, yeah, based on that specific interaction and based on that specific experience, like he changed my mind about this. And it took more than a year for me to step up and to say, well, now is the right time. So now is the right time. Let's do it.
That's how I feel about Oliver.
I like Oliver. I love that guy. I love that guy. Uh,
Me too.
I really do. Like if you guys, you'd better come here together. By the way.
You gotta come to Morocco. I know you're always making Morocco look so great. Like, the experience I had was very it's funny because the most picturesque documentation I have of that trip is me on a camel, and it's a really cool picture, but it was the lamest part of the trip. It was like I hop on the camel and this huge line of tourists, and they walk me in a circle, snap the picture, and then they're like, "Get off." And I'm like, "Okay." It was just like the
You got
most
scared.
nobody sees that picture and it's like, "Oh, wow, Morocco." I'm like, that was not what it looks like. That was the lamest part. But yeah,
Well, if
I
you,
think that'd be what it is
this-
for you, though. I think the expansion thing that we're talking about. So this is
Mhm.
really exciting.
Yeah, I hope so, and I hope to be as transparent as possible with my people because and those are my friends. I don't consider that. I told you this. I don't consider them as followers. They're not members. They're actual people, and they deserve attention and respect and guidance, um, within the limit of what I can humanly do. And so the 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 benevolence I get back from those people is just awesome. And like my followers are the best followers in the world. And
How I feel about mine.
I love them. I love them.
I feel
I
like
get
that judgment, the way you judge that is very important, right? And not everybody has that. Like, I've even vibed with accounts that had less than 100 followers that are now huge, and I
yeah.
just liked their responses. I liked the way they thought. I liked their ideas, so I followed them back, and, like, I didn't look at their follower count. Now they're big. Like, there's a couple girls I'm thinking of on here that we talk in DMs and stuff like that, and that happened to me when I was a really small account. Like, and it was just because you have that judgment. You're not just looking at people as a number or a follower or whatever. Like, you can
Yes.
tell, "Oh, I like the way you think." Like, I'm gonna respond to this, like, this inspires me or provokes my thoughts in some way.
And
Yeah,
and it's generally the best way to go with it.
yeah.
Yeah. Um I think we'll need to wrap it up here. I still need to attend some meetings.
I really appreciate you,
Thank you for your
reaching
time.
out.
Thank you for your time. Thank you
Yeah.
for the opportunity. We should do this again.
Are you gonna start your YouTube channel?
Probably. I'm not saying anything
No.
here, but probably. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I'm happy to do it again. This was fun. I think this is really
I'll tell.
important, and this is kind of immortalized as we enter this phase, right,
Hmm.
of the world we're
This
in,
is the
so
first. Yeah, this is the first one.
yeah, the Atlas face reveal. It's such cool, cool, cool. Thanks so much
Thank you
for
for
joining me.
this. Thank you, T. It was a pleasure and an honor to have this conversation with you. I think we should do that again. And just hit me up.
Cool, I will. Much love.
Ha- Have a great one.
You too.